What would happen if an elevator turned out to have programming like a sophisticated computer? They could control it as they pleased until finally something happened that was beyond the limits, and an accident happened that befell many people. The elevator was in a building called the Millennium Building. At that time, there were two building guards who were doing guard activities. They were sometimes nosy by watching a couple making love through the building's binoculars. Then they received a report from the CCTV that there was an elevator that seemed to be having problems. The elevator lights suddenly gave an emergency signal. It had happened several times in the past month. Maybe it was just a false alarm and an error in the lights. The two guards tried to check, and it seemed fine there. One of the guards went to the toilet. The other waited in front of the elevator until his flashlight had a problem. The man entered the middle between the elevator doors and experienced a strange incident. The elevator seemed to want to close itself, but was still held by the man. Until finally the elevator acted harder and tried to pin the man. Luckily the man was fine, but the flashlight that was on his waist was crushed because of the crush of the elevator doors. What actually happened there? Meanwhile, this man named Jeff worked at an elevator company installed in the Millennium Building. He was visiting his friend named Mark. They were on the same job and were ordered to go to the Millennium Building to check the elevator regularly. In the Millennium Building, there are many rooms that are used for commercial purposes. One of them is a sports room for pregnant women. Some pregnant women had just finished exercising. They went down using the elevator. But suddenly the elevator went down quickly, and suddenly the elevator stopped suddenly, making the pregnant women fall to the farthest floor. The control and CCTV received an anomaly signal on the elevator. They tried to handle it by calling the elevator maintenance department. They had to act quickly because the women in the elevator were starting to run out of oxygen and were overheating. Unfortunately, the elevator door was not easy to open, as if it was being held back by something. One of the control parties tried to come directly to the elevator because his wife was trapped there. But increasingly strange things happened to the elevator. The elevator finally went down to the ground floor, and when it opened, they saw some of them giving birth in the elevator. Some even almost died from lack of oxygen. On the other hand, there is a woman named Jennifer. She works in a print media company as a news seeker. She was told by her boss to go to the Millennium Building because there was a new case. Meanwhile, Jeff and Mark had just arrived and were asked to check all the damage. The building manager asked them to act quickly. If the elevator stopped for one day, it would be detrimental to the building and, of course, himself. The elevator control was at the top of the building. Mark and Jeff started looking for something odd, but couldn't find it. Meanwhile, on the other hand, there was a blind man with his dog who had just finished from the salon. He got on the elevator, but something strange happened here again. The elevator was supposed to take them down, but instead it went up. The man got out and tried to go down with the other elevator, but it turned out that when the elevator door opened, the elevator room was not there. As a result, he fell along with his dog. The next night, the elevator misbehaved again. This time the targets were two building guards. The CCTV felt suspicious about the elevator. The elevator opened and closed by itself, but no one entered or exited. They tried to find out what happened. The initial suspicion was that there was an intruder or a prankster. The elevator seemed to be playing a trick on them. Then, when the elevator door opened, one of the guards saw a dog's corpse hanging from one of the metal frames. Then, suddenly, the elevator door closed and clamped the guard's head. His friend tried to free him, but in vain. The elevator slowly descended until it cut off the guard's head. This case is getting longer and attracting the attention of many media. If this continues, the building will likely be closed for elevator maintenance, and that will certainly be detrimental to many parties, including the manager. At that time, Mark was doing his own inspection without Jeff. He found several items such as a slimy cell phone. Then, when he was in the toilet, he met Jennifer, who was disguised as a maintenance worker, even though he only took one of the clothes from the maintenance department. However, Mark knew that Jennifer was only pretending to want to find out more information. As a result, he was stopped by the police on duty. Their first introduction was indeed unpleasant, but it seemed like they would be great partners. After checking, Mark and Jeff met the manager. Jeff explained that it seemed like their elevator was fine, and there were no serious problems. Jeff's answer made the manager quite happy, but Mark said something slightly different. He said that for the time being their elevator was fine. Of course, that made the manager and even Jeff wonder, why did Mark say that? If the Millennium Building manager was disappointed. They would no longer want to use their services, and ultimately an argument broke out between them. When Mark was at work, he was called by his boss. His boss was upset with Mark for what he said, especially since his face appeared in the newspaper. Because of that incident, Mark was no longer assigned to be with Jeff. Meanwhile, two young men were playing rollerblading wildly. They entered the Millennium Building parking lot. One of them fell because of a car. Then the young man was sucked by the elevator, then pulled out and threw him from the top of the building. This news again raised a big question about what happened to the young man. Why did he jump from the building? Mark saw Jennifer there and went to her. Because of Jennifer, Mark had to get scolded by his boss because the news was made by Jennifer. But in the end, they made up and tried not to bother each other. Then that night, Jennifer came to Mark's apartment. She brought a CCTV recording that was in the parking lot when the terrible incident happened to the young man. From the CCTV recording, they saw that the young man seemed to be pulled by the elevator. And what was more surprising was that it only took a few seconds for the elevator to reach the top floor. It was really strange. Mark tried to ask Jeff for help and tell him this, but Jeff seemed to refuse and didn't want to get involved. Because Jeff didn't want to help him, Mark and Jennifer did their own investigation. They went to Jennifer's office to find out who made the elevator for the first time. At first, they had difficulty finding it. Then they were directed to one named Steinberg. He is a chip maker for all computers. But many times his inventions were unsatisfactory and could even be said to have failed. He was fired from the military research team and is still working on making the chip. His chip is unusual. He combines dolphin intelligence to improve the chip's capabilities. But they still haven't found what it has to do with the elevator. One day, the Millennium Building held a press conference. There, Mark and Jennifer saw Steinberg. It turned out that Steinberg and Mark's superior had been working together to build the elevator with his chip. This further strengthened their suspicion that the elevator was indeed problematic, and the main problem was the chip. The elevator in the Millennium Building continues to claim victims, this time many victims. Even the president spoke about the incident. While Mark and Steinberg's superiors are talking to each other, Steinberg is asked to stop the chip he made. They don't want any more victims. However, Steinberg refuses. He believes that the chip he made will be his greatest discovery and will even surpass human intelligence. Because of the incident, the Millennium Building was temporarily closed. The police special team agreed that this was the work of terrorists. Jennifer and Mark tried to get in there, but it was not easy. Jennifer was blocked and interrogated about why she was there and what her purpose was. Meanwhile, Mark managed to get in through the car. Quietly, he entered the building filled with many special teams. Mark had to find where the chip was located. Carefully, Mark climbed to the top of the building and started to turn on one of the elevator levers, even though the building had turned it off. This triggered the authorities to find out who the perpetrator was. Mark prepared the equipment he needed. He entered the elevator line secretly, while the special team continued to search for his whereabouts. On the other hand, Jennifer was finally locked in a room because it was considered suspicious. Mark continued to search for the source of the problem. Then he found mucus that continued to drip from a ventilation. When it was opened, it turned out that inside the ventilation there was something similar to a heart, beating and glowing. It must be a chip that began to mutate into something like that. Mark then stabbed the knife into the heart repeatedly. Strange events began to appear. The special team that tried to go up through the elevator began to be attacked. In the midst of the incident, Steinberg came and tried to enter the building. He escaped easily. But the police felt something was wrong with Steinberg. On the other hand, Mark managed to steal the bazooka belonging to the special team. He was going to use it to destroy the cursed chip, but he was blocked by Steinberg. Even a fight broke out between them. Mark was cornered. Luckily, Jennifer came to his aid. Not long after, the police came to surround them. Then Steinberg took the opportunity to take Jennifer hostage. The elevator reacted to pull Steinberg and Mark, but Jennifer managed to give the bazooka to Mark so that Mark destroyed the cursed chip and heart. After that incident, the police realized that the main perpetrator was Steinberg. Weeks after that incident, Mark and Jennifer have become friends. Even more than that,